The clinking of crystal glasses and the low hum of conversation filled the polished interior of the restaurant, a sanctuary of Chicago's elite where million-dollar deals were sealed over plates of artfully arranged cuisine. Maxwell Thornton sat at the head of the table, his presence commanding even when he barely spoke. At 45, he had the kind of wealth that newspapers like to glorify. His real estate empire touched almost every corner of the city, from glittering high-rises to sprawling developments that bore his name. His salt-tan pepper hair gave him an air of distinguished authority, and the sharp cut of his tailored suit reminded anyone near him that Maxwell Thornton was a man who belonged to the top tier of society. And yet, behind his calm exterior, his eyes held a hollowness, a quiet emptiness that no amount of business victories could ever conceal. He lifted his glass of water absent-mindedly, only to set it back down untouched. Richard Anderson, seated opposite him, was nodding as Maxwell explained the grand vision for the new downtown project. The words flowed smoothly. He had practiced them countless times, selling not just buildings, but a legacy. But even as his voice carried the confidence of a man who controlled an empire, his thoughts drifted. They often did. To her, to Eleanor, 7 years gone. Yet the wound felt as fresh as the night the phone rang and shattered his world. A rain-slick road, a mangled car, a call from the hospital, and then silence that had stretched on for years. 3 years of marriage, 3 years of laughter and whispered dreams of children, erased in one brutal instant. Maxwell's hand tightened around his napkin, the edges twisting under his grip. He had grown accustomed to wearing his grief like an invisible cloak, present, but hidden beneath the layers of control and discipline. Then, something in the corner of his vision pulled him from the practiced rhythm of his pitch, a movement beyond the glass wall that stretched along the restaurant's side. At first, he dismissed it as another pedestrian among the endless flow of Michigan Avenue. But then his gaze fixed. A woman stood on the sidewalk just across the street, her hair pulled into a messy bun, strands of honey blonde catching the winter light. Beside her, two little girls clung to her hands, their clothes threadbare, their shoes worn. They were holding a cardboard sign he couldn't read from this distance. They looked tired, hungry, fragile, but none of that mattered. His world tilted, because he knew that profile, that delicate slope of the nose, that graceful neck. It was a face he had memorized through 7 years of mourning. It was Eleanor. And the girls, he felt his chest tighten as if gripped by a vice they could, had been her reflections at 7 years old. Every detail was unmistakable, down to the bright, searching eyes. The glass in his hand slipped from his fingers, crashing to the floor and shattering in a burst that made every head at the table turn. Anderson's voice called his name, sharp, with concern, but Maxwell didn't hear. His chair scraped back with a violent sound as he rose, napkin falling from his lap. He moved as if in a dream, weaving between tables, ignoring the startled murmurs that followed him. By the time he pushed through the doors and into the chill air of the avenue, his heart thundered in his chest like it might burst free. "Eleanor," he called, his voice raw and desperate, tearing through the hum of traffic. The woman's head snapped up, her eyes widened not with recognition, but with fear. Without hesitation, she yanked the girls close and turned to run. "Wait!" Maxwell's voice cracked, his feet already pounding the pavement. "Please wait." The city blurred around him, honking cars, indifferent faces. The steady rush of pedestrians, none of it mattered. He saw only her, slipping like smoke into the crowd. He dodged a man in a suit, stumbled past a vendor, his breath ragged as he tried to keep her in sight. The twins stumbled once, one of them glancing back, and then it happened. The smaller of the two broke free, running toward him. Maxwell froze, staring down at her as the crowd seemed to dissolve around them. She had Eleanor's eyes, his own, eyes staring back at him, and when she spoke, the words struck him like lightning. "Daddy," she said with quiet certainty, her tiny hand reaching out. "She said you'd find us." For a moment, Maxwell's knees gave way. He dropped to the ground, trembling, his vision swimming. He wanted to pull her close, to never let her go. But then a cry split the air, Eleanor's voice, desperate and cracking. "Lily, no." The child hesitated, torn, then spun and ran back to her mother, who stood at the alley entrance with the other twin clutched to her chest. Their eyes met across the distance. It was her, Eleanor, older, thinner, but alive. Tears streamed down her face, and then she turned, vanishing into the shadows with the girls. Maxwell tried to stand, to chase after them, but his body betrayed him. A wave of dizziness consumed him, the world tilting sideways. His last sight before darkness swallowed him whole was Eleanor's face, framed by tears and fear, impossibly alive. When he awoke, the sterile lights of a hospital ceiling stared back at him. Dr. Williams, his physician of 10 years, leaned over, voice steady but edged with worry. "You collapsed on Michigan Avenue, Mr. Thornton. Stress-induced syncope, most likely." Maxwell's voice was hoarse. "The woman, the children, did you find them?" The doctor exchanged a glance with the nurse, then shook his head. "Witnesses say you were alone when you fell. There was no woman, no children." Maxwell's heart hammered in protest. He could still hear the girl's voice in his ears, feel her small hand reaching for him. He could still see Eleanor's tear-streaked face, no matter what the doctor said, no matter how insane it sounded. He knew the truth with terrifying clarity. Eleanor was alive, and she had their daughters. The city never slept, and that night, Chicago's heartbeat seemed louder than ever. Maxwell lay in the pristine sheets of his hospital bed, eyes open and unblinking, staring at the ceiling as though it might offer him answers. Nurses came and went, checking vitals, adjusting machines, murmuring reassurances he didn't hear. His mind was elsewhere, on the alley, on the girl's voice, on Eleanor's tear-streaked face. The doctors could call it stress, delusion, grief-induced hallucination. They didn't know what he knew. He had buried his wife 7 years ago, and yet he had seen her alive. He had looked into the eyes of children who could not exist unless Eleanor had survived. They had called him Daddy. That single word refused to leave his ears. At dawn, Jessica arrived, her expression pale and drawn. "Mr. Thornton," she said softly, "you should rest. The Anderson group is waiting for a reschedule." "But I'm not rescheduling," Maxwell interrupted, his voice firm, stripped to the polished veneer he wore in boardrooms. "I'm done with business deals until I find them." "Find who?" Jessica asked carefully, her eyes searching his face. "My wife," Maxwell whispered, his throat tight. "And my daughters." Jessica flinched, as though the words themselves carried weight. She had worked beside him for years, watched him build his empire brick by brick, dollar by dollar. She had also watched him waste away in grief, living in the shell of a mansion too large for one man, walking the halls like a ghost. And yet, hearing him say it now, she saw something new and ember in his eyes that hadn't been there in years. Not despair, not emptiness, determination. By noon, Maxwell was discharged, against Dr. Williams's advice. The doctors cautioned him about stress, about rest, about hallucinations. He left anyway, stepping into the biting Chicago air like a man with a purpose. But he had no plan, only a single conviction: Eleanor was alive. The first place he went was home, the cavernous Lincoln Park mansion that had become a shrine of silence. He ignored Mrs. Peterson's worried look, ignored the dinner waiting in the oven. His footsteps carried him to the East Wing, to Eleanor's untouched office. He stood there, breathing in the faint trace of her perfume that seemed to linger even after years. His gaze roamed the desk, the bookshelves, the family photographs that hadn't been moved. His hands shook as he touched a frame. Their wedding day, Eleanor in her gown, laughing at something only they shared. His throat closed, but his eyes caught something strange, a book slightly out of alignment on the shelf. He pulled it free. Advances in Genetic Therapy. The book slipped, and behind it, a small USB drive clattered to the floor. Maxwell bent, picked it up, and stared at it as though it were a message from beyond the grave. His pulse quickened. He plugged it into his secure laptop, fingers trembling as he tried passwords, birthdays, anniversaries, places. Denied, denied, denied. He closed his eyes, remembering their honeymoon conversation about her childhood home in Minnesota, about the willow tree she loved. Blue door. He typed. The screen unlocked. A video file appeared. He clicked it. Eleanor's face filled the screen, gaunt but fierce, her eyes darting off camera as though she feared being watched. "Maxwell," she whispered, "if you're seeing this, then something happened. Something I couldn't stop. I'm alive, but I can't be with you. Not yet. They're watching us, always watching. The Reinhardt Institute, Victoria's project. It isn't what it seems. I found out too much. They tampered with me, Max, with our children." Her voice cracked. "I couldn't risk them taking the twins. I had to disappear. I had to make you believe I was gone." The video cut abruptly. leaving Maxwell staring at the screen as though it had just ripped the ground from beneath his feet. He slammed his fist on the desk. "No," he whispered. "Not you, Eleanor. Not this." But the evidence was clear. She had run. She had survived. She had children his children. The following evening, under the dim lights of a West Side cafe, Maxwell sat across from Sarah Blackwood, a retired detective with graying hair pulled into a no-nonsense ponytail. Her eyes were sharp. Her voice blunt. "Let me get this straight," she said, leaning forward. "You want me to find a woman the world buried 7 years ago, who you claim is alive and raising your children after faking her death in a car accident?" "I don't claim anything," Maxwell snapped, sliding the USB across the table. "I saw her. I saw the girls. They called me daddy, and I have this." Sarah studied the screen, her skeptical expression fading to something harder. "This is no amateur fake." And Reinhardt, she shook her head. "That name has come up before. Black budget research, genetic trials, things I could never prove when I was with CPD." "Then help me prove it now," Maxwell said. His voice trembled, not with weakness, but with desperation. "Help me bring them back." Sarah leaned back, folding her arms. "If your wife is alive, if she's been hiding with those kids, there's a reason. Maybe she's protecting them from you." The words landed like a knife. Maxwell's jaw clenched. "She thought I was involved, but I wasn't. I never was." Sarah studied him for a long moment. She had seen liars, manipulators, grief-stricken men who built delusions out of hope. But his eyes, sharp, broken, desperate, didn't look like delusion. They looked like a man who had been tricked. Finally, she slid the USB back to him. "I'll take the case, but you may not like what I find." Maxwell nodded, swallowing the knot in his throat. "If Eleanor ran from me, I'll accept that. But if she ran from them, then God help anyone who tries to keep me from my daughters." And across the city, beneath the Roosevelt Road Viaduct, Eleanor, now Amanda, huddled close to Lily and Rose as the cold night settled in. The twins whispered to each other, voices blending in uncanny harmony. "Daddy saw us," Lily said. "He won't stop now," Rose replied. Amanda's eyes filled with tears as she clutched them tighter. "That's what I'm afraid of." The night pressed down heavy over Chicago, the kind of night when shadows clung to the corners of buildings, and silence had a weight all its own under the cracked concrete of the Roosevelt Viaduct. Eleanor Amanda, as she called herself, now crouched low, pulling her daughter's clothes. The twins huddled beneath a tattered blanket, their eyes too sharp to knowing for children their age. 7 years of running had stripped them of the innocence most children carried, replacing it with something far older, forged in fear and survival. "We can't stay here," Eleanor whispered, her voice trembling as she stuffed a threadbare backpack with what little they had. "He saw us. He knows." Lily looked up, her face illuminated by the dim glow of a passing street lamp. "He didn't look angry, Mama. He looked broken." Eleanor closed her eyes, fighting the ache that twisted inside her chest. Maxwell, even after all these years, even after all the lies she told herself to keep going, his name still burned. But the truth was more dangerous than her longing. "You don't understand," she said sharply, her voice cracking. "Sad men are the most dangerous. Sad men will tear the world apart to fix what they lost." Rose shifted closer to her sister, slipping her small hand into Lily's. "But he's the man in your pictures," she said softly. "The one you cry over when you think we're asleep." The words shattered Eleanor's carefully constructed armor. For a moment, she saw herself reflected in their identical eyes, saw the resemblance to Maxwell so clearly it was like looking at ghosts. She turned away, blinking back tears, forcing her voice to steady. "Pack your things. Tonight we move. We catch the bus to Milwaukee before sunrise." The girls obeyed silently, but their exchanged glances said more than words. They knew. They had always known. Across the city, in the dim glow of a converted warehouse office, Sarah Blackwood spread files across her desk. Maxwell stood rigid beside her, staring at the evidence like a man staring into the abyss. Bank transfers, corporate documents, medical reports, all threads leading back to one name, Reinhardt Institute. Sarah muttered, tapping a file with her pen. "You know who runs it." Maxwell's jaw clenched. Victoria Reinhardt, Eleanor, consulted for her once, years ago. She called her brilliant, visionary. I called her arrogant. Sarah's eyes narrowed. "Arrogant doesn't begin to cover it." Reinhardt has more government contracts than half the defense companies in this country. Rumors of human trials, nothing ever proven. And here, she shoved a stack of financial records toward him. Money moved through shell companies that originated in your accounts. Maxwell's stomach dropped. That's impossible, is it? Sarah challenged. Transfers started 3 months before Eleanor's accident. Continued 2 years after. Who had access? Edward Winters, Maxwell muttered, the name. Tasting like betrayal. His CFO, his friend. A man he had trusted for 15 years. Suddenly, every carefully explained discrepancy, every minor irregularity, every too smooth reassurance snapped into focus. Sarah leaned back, studying him. Maybe your wife didn't run from you. Maybe she ran from the monster pulling your strings. Maxwell turned away. His reflection caught in the warehouse window a man in an expensive suit with hollow eyes. A man who built empires yet couldn't protect the one thing that mattered. She thought I was part of it, he whispered. She thought I betrayed her. You're going to prove her wrong, Sarah said firmly. But you need to understand something. If Reinhardt knows she's alive, if she knows those girls exist, they're already targets. And Reinhardt doesn't play games. She'll send people who don't miss. Maxwell's hand tightened into a fist. Then I'll find them before she does. But even as he spoke, across the ocean in a glass-walled office overlooking the Swiss Alps, Victoria Reinhardt was already watching. The woman exuded power, from the precision of her tailored suit to the cold gleam in her eyes. On her desk, 3 monitors flickered with grainy surveillance still Chicago street cameras capturing a woman with 2 small children. Eleanor's face, alive. Impossible, Victoria whispered, though her voice held no disbelief. Only fury. She was supposed to be dead. Her age shifted nervously. Facial recognition confirmed the match. Maxwell Thornton saw them. One of the children approached him directly. Victoria's lips curved into a thin smile that didn't reach her eyes. The twins, she murmured. My finest work. 7 years, and still beyond anything the others have achieved. Her smile faded, replaced with steel. Activate containment protocol. I want them back within 24 hours. And Thornton, Victoria tapped her manicured nails against the desk. Each sound like a ticking clock. Discredit him. Financial audits, legal complications, anything to keep him busy. If that fails, remove him. Her gaze shifted back to the monitors, to Eleanor, to the twins. You can't run forever, Eleanor, she whispered. You can't hide my children from me. Back under the viaduct, the twins stirred from uneasy sleep. Their hands touched lightly, eyes fluttering as though they were sharing the same dream. Lily gasped softly, clutching her sister's hand tighter. What is it? Rose whispered. White rooms. Lily murmured. Children in cages. They're scared. Rose's eyes widened. Like us. Eleanor crouched beside them, panic rising in her chest. What did you see? The twins spoke together. Their voice is a perfect mirror. They know, Mama, they're coming. And in that instant, the night around them felt smaller, darker, and far more dangerous. The storm broke over Chicago with a violence that seemed almost fated. Sheets of rain hammering the streets, turning the city into a mirror of fractured light and shadow. Lightning split the sky, illuminating Maxwell's mansion as if it were a castle under siege. Inside, the atmosphere was just as charged. Maps, financial records, and photographs covered the mahogany table in his study. Sarah Blackwood leaned over them, her expression grim, while Maxwell stood near the window, his reflection fractured by rivulets of rain. He had spent 7 years building walls of steel around his grief, but those walls were cracking, and through them pulsed something dangerous: determination, sharpened into a blade. They've been using your company for years, Sarah said, stabbing a finger at the diagram she'd drawn. Shell companies, fake research grants. Edward Winters has been laundering money right under your nose, and all of it flows to Reinhardt. Maxwell turned, his jaw tight. Eleanor thought I was part of it. That's why she ran. Sarah didn't soften her tone. She had every reason to believe that. The paper trail points directly to you. Someone wanted it that way. Before Maxwell could answer, the storm outside was interrupted by headlights sweeping across the driveway. His security system chimed an alert. Maxwell crossed to the monitor, his breath catching at the sight the black SUVs had pulled up. Silently, engines idling, their tinted windows reflecting the rain-slicked streetlights. They're here, Sarah said flatly. She drew her gun, checking the chamber with a practiced flick. Reinhardt doesn't waste time. Maxwell's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Take the drive. Get out. Now. FM, his chest tightened. Father Michael, Eleanor had always trusted him. That could only mean one thing. She and the twins were close. The study doors burst open and Thomas Wells, Eleanor's old colleague, stumbled in, his face pale, his coat dripping with rain. They're moving fast. He gasped. I led them here to buy her time. Eleanor and the girls are safe for the moment, but not for long. Maxwell's world narrowed to a single point. She was near, alive, hunted. He grabbed the USB drive Eleanor had left, slipped it into his coat, and turned to Sarah. We can't fight them here. We move. Now. Thunder roared as the three of them slipped out the side entrance. Rain soaking through their clothes. The sound of boots splashing on wet pavement echoing to close behind. Maxwell's security chief appeared, bleeding from a wound on his temple. Eastgate's compromised. They've got men circling the property. Credentials say federal, but they're fake. Garage. Maxwell snapped. We take your car. Minutes later, they sped away in an unremarkable Ford sedan. Weaving through industrial backstreets, Maxwell gripped the wheel, his knuckles white, while Sarah barked directions to avoid traffic cameras. Thomas sat in the back, pressing a rag to the security chief's wound, his voice low and urgent. Maxwell, you don't understand. Eleanor wasn't just running from them. She was running because of what they did to the girls. What did they do? Maxwell demanded, his voice breaking against the storm. Thomas hesitated, his eyes flicking to the rain-streaked window. They're not ordinary children. Reinhardt manipulated Eleanor's pregnancy, altered the embryos. The twins are different, smarter, stronger, connected in ways science can't explain. Maxwell felt the air leave his lungs. His hands trembled against the wheel. You're telling me my daughters were experimented on? Yes, Thomas said grimly, and Reinhardt will do anything to get them back. Across the city, in the basement of St. Catherine's Church, Eleanor knelt with the twins, her arms wrapped around them as Father Michael lit a single candle against the storm's darkness. The ancient stones of the church walls groaned under the weight of the rain, but inside, it felt like a fragile sanctuary. Eleanor's face was gaunt, her eyes darting constantly toward the narrow windows. But for the first time in years, there was a flicker of something else. Hope. You saw him. Father Michael said softly. Eleanor's voice cracked. I couldn't stop it. He looked at me like I was a ghost, like he was seeing salvation and damnation all at once. She pressed her face into her hands, and the girls Lily ran to him. Father Michael's gaze softened. Maybe it's time. No. Eleanor's voice sharpened, fear rising. You don't understand what he's capable of. If Reinhardt convinced me he was involved, the twins stirred, sitting cross-legged on the cold stone floor, their fingertips touching. Their voices rose in eerie unison. They're here. Eleanor froze. What do you mean? The girls' eyes glazed as though they were looking through walls. Men in black suits, guns under their jackets, 8, 10, 12, coming from both sides. Father Michael crossed himself, the candlelight flickering over his lined face. The catacombs. He whispered, they'll buy us time. Before Eleanor could protest, he pressed a hidden latch on the confessional wall. The stone shifted, revealing a narrow staircase plunging into darkness. These tunnels were built in 1887. During Prohibition, they ran liquor through them. Few remember they exist. Eleanor grabbed the twins' hands, her heart pounding as she ushered them inside. But as the wall closed behind them, she allowed herself one fleeting thought. Maxwell was out there. And if he truly wasn't part of this, then maybe, just maybe, he was the only man who could save them. Back in the sedan, Sarah's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, her jaw tightening. Warehouse in Pullman, she said. Eleanor left coordinates in her files. If she's alive, if she's still fighting, she'll go there. It's the only place with enough history to hide something worth killing for. Maxwell's grip tightened on the wheel. The storm raged around them, the city itself seeming to convulse with secrets. For 7 years he had buried his grief in silence, but now, truth clawed its way to the surface. His wife was alive. His daughters were out there, and Reinhardt's men were closing in on them all. I've lost them once, he whispered, his voice shaking with both fury and resolve. I won't lose them again. Lightning split the night, and in that flash, it became clear. Chicago was no longer just a city, it was a battlefield. Rain still hammered the city, running in silvery sheets down every skyscraper and pooling black in the streets. Chicago was wide awake that night, but in one forgotten corner of its history, beneath the rusty bones of the Pullman district, a different drama was unfolding. The air in the old administration building was damp with mold and dust, the once proud brick walls now groaning under decades of neglect. It was here, in a place Maxwell Thornton himself owned but had never stepped foot inside, that fate pulled every scattered thread of his broken life together. The sedan screeched to a stop outside the gates, headlights cutting the tunnel through the rain. Maxwell killed the engine and climbed out, the weight of the USB drive heavy in his coat pocket. Sarah stepped out with her gun drawn, scanning the shadows. Thomas followed, carrying a small satchel of medical supplies and research files. The storm muted the sounds of the city beyond. Here, there was only silence, broken by the dripping of water through broken windows and the groan of rusted metal in the wind. Maxwell's chest was tight, every nerve on edge. He could feel it, almost taste it in the air. She was near. Eleanor, his Eleanor, alive. Inside, the building was a labyrinth of dark corridors, renovation equipment scattered like abandoned toys. Emergency lights cast long, skeletal shadows, turning every corner into a threat. Sarah moved with a predator's grace, her weapon raised, while Thomas stumbled behind. His nerves frayed. Then came the whisper, faint, echoing, but undeniable. Maxwell, his heart lurched. He turned a corner and froze. There she was, thinner. Her hair dyed dark, her face hollowed by years of running, but it was her, Eleanor. She stood 20 feet away, the twins at her side, their identical faces, solemn and unreadable. Father Michael hovered just behind them, his hand on the shoulder of one child, his eyes watchful. For a long moment, no one spoke. The storm outside seemed to fall silent, as though even the world held its breath. Maxwell stepped forward, his voice breaking. Eleanor, her eyes filled with tears, her lips trembled. You found us. The twins moved closer to her, clutching her hands. They studied Maxwell with eyes that mirrored his own, sharp, intelligent, wary, and then, together, they spoke in eerie harmony. They're coming. Sarah stiffened, swinging her weapon toward the stairwell. The faint echo of boots thudded through the hollow corridors, multiple sets, disciplined and purposeful. Reinhardt's hunters had arrived. We have to move, Father Michael urged. This way, Eleanor said quickly, her voice shaking. She pulled the twins toward a steel door at the far end of the hall, the basement archives. I hid something there years ago, everything we need to bring her down. Maxwell followed, his legs unsteady, but driven by fury and hope tangled together. They descended into the bowels of the building, the air colder, the smell of earth stronger. Eleanor led them through a maze of pipes and concrete until they reached a massive vault-like door. She entered a code on a rusted keypad, and with a shuddering groan, the door swung open. Inside, rows of old blueprints and documents lay in storage, but at the far wall, hidden behind a cabinet, was a small safe. Eleanor knelt quickly, her fingers steady despite the storm of emotions in her eyes. She entered a combination. The safe clicked open. She withdrew the things, an external hard drive and a sealed medical container. She pressed them into Maxwell's hands. Proof, she whispered. Everything Reinhardt has done. The files, the protocols, the samples. It's all here. Before Maxwell could respond, the twins stiffened, their small hands clasping each other. There inside, Lily said, 12 men. Guns ready. 3 minutes. Sarah swore under her breath, raising her weapon. We need an exit, now. The freight tunnels, Father Michael said quickly. They run under this whole district, connect to the river. Eleanor nodded, clutching her daughters close. It's the only way. They move fast. Maxwell carrying the evidence like a holy relic, Eleanor half pulling, half carrying her girls. The sound of boots grew louder, closer, the voices of men, barking orders as they fanned through the building. A flashlight beam cut across the wall just as Sarah fired a shot, shattering the silence, sending echoes screaming through the concrete. The hunters shouted, returning fire. Bullets sparked off pipes and metal beams. Maxwell grabbed Eleanor, shoving her behind a support pillar as debris rained down. His heart thundered not from fear, but from the sight of her alive in his arms again, trembling, her eyes wild with both love and terror. We'll get out, he promised, his voice fierce. I won't lose you again. The twins crouched beside them, eerily calm despite the chaos. Rose placed her tiny hand on Maxwell's wrist. her voice steady. "We know who's lying. We can help." Maxwell stared at her, astonished. She was a child, and yet in her gaze burned something beyond childhood, something Reinhardt had created, something Eleanor had fought to protect. They pressed deeper into the tunnels, Father Michael leading the way. The walls trembled with the storm and gunfire above. The air was thick with the smell of rust and gunpowder. Finally, they reached a bricked-over archway. Father Michael shoved aside debris, revealing a narrow passage yawning into blackness. "This way," he said, but as they started through, a voice echoed behind them, cold, confident, female. "Going somewhere." Eleanor froze, every drop of blood draining from her face. Maxwell turned, his stomach twisting. Victoria Reinhardt herself stood at the far end of the corridor, flanked by armed men. Her suit was immaculate despite the storm, her silver hair tied back, her eyes gleaming with triumph. "You've been a difficult ghost to chase, Eleanor," she said smoothly. "But the running ends tonight." The twins clutched their mother's hands, their voices trembling as they whispered together. "She wants us." Maxwell stepped forward, fury burning through him. "Over my dead body." Victoria's smile widened, cruel and amused. "That," she said, raising her hand, "could be arranged." And in that instant, the tunnels erupted with chaos, gunfire, screams. The storm above crashing in unison as past and future collided in the dark. The tunnels roared with violence. Muzzle flashes lit the darkness in staccato bursts, each one cutting across Eleanor's pale face and the terrified stillness of the twins. Sarah fired back with the calm precision of a woman who had stared down death before, while Father Michael guided Eleanor and the girls deeper into the shadows. Maxwell stayed close, shielding them with his body even as bullets sparked against the walls around him. The storm above seemed to echo their struggle, thunder booming like the war drums of something ancient. Victoria Reinhardt didn't flinch. She moved through the chaos with the unhurried grace of a predator who believed the kill was already hers. Her guards advanced methodically, their rifles sweeping the narrow corridor, pinning Maxwell's group in place. The smile on her lips was not one of victory, it was one of inevitability. "Stop running, Eleanor," she called over the echo of gunfire. Her voice was clear, sharp, carrying easily through the chamber. "You've cost me 7 years, billions of dollars, and 100 sleepless nights. But you forget I built you. I built them." Her eyes cut to the twins. "They're mine. Never." Eleanor's voice ripped through the dark, fierce and trembling. She held both girls tight as if her arms alone could shield them from the world. Maxwell's fury boiled over. He broke cover, grabbing a loose length of rusted pipe and hurling it at one of Reinhardt's men. The distraction gave Sarah the angle she needed. Her shots rang out, dropping 2 of them in seconds. "Move," she barked. Father Michael pulled at a heavy iron hatch set into the wall, long forgotten and fused with rust. Maxwell joined him, their combined strength forcing it open with a shriek of metal. The air beyond smelled of damp earth and river water. A forgotten freight line sloped downward into the black, the faint sound of rushing water carrying through the stone. "Go," Maxwell urged, pushing Eleanor and the twins inside. He followed close, firing blindly over his shoulder as Sarah and Thomas covered their retreat. The group stumbled down the tunnel, every footstep echoing like a drumbeat of desperation. The walls webbed moisture, rivulets running down old brick, rats scattered into cracks. This was no place for children, yet the twins pressed forward with eerie composure, their small hands gripping Eleanor's as if guiding her instead of the other way around. At a junction, they froze, their eyes unfocused, their breathing synchronized. "Left," Lily whispered. "No," Rose said firmly. "Right?" "Left is death." Father Michael didn't question them. He trusted. They veered right, seconds before bullets ripped through the brick where they would have been. Reinhardt's soldiers were relentless. At last, the tunnel spilled into a cavernous chamber that opened above the Chicago River. A broken maintenance platform jutted into the dark water, slick with algae. Rain poured through a cracked grate overhead, adding to the flood that roared past. It was escape, but a deadly one. Sarah didn't hesitate. "Jump." Eleanor's grip on her daughters tightened. "They'll drown. We'll drown if we stay," Sarah snapped. Another shot ricocheted off the wall inches from her face. Maxwell scooped Rose into his arms, his voice a growl of determination. "Trust me." Without waiting, he leapt. The icy water swallowed them whole. Eleanor screamed, then followed, clutching Lily tight as she plunged. Father Michael and Thomas were last. diving just as Reinhardt's men stormed the platform. Victoria reached the edge, peering into the torrent with calm detachment. "Run, little ghosts," she murmured. "Run as far as you can. The river won't save you." Hours later, soaked, shivering, and bruised, the group regrouped in an abandoned warehouse on the West Loop. Maxwell's secret art storage facility, hidden behind layers of shell companies no one but him knew existed. It was here, in the echoing emptiness of brick walls and steel beams, that they drew breath. The twins sat curled in blankets, sipping warm broth Father Michael had scavenged. Their faces were pale, but their eyes burned with strange intensity. Eleanor paced like a caged animal, her every glance filled with mistrust and guilt. Maxwell watched her, his chest heavy with everything unspoken. Finally, Eleanor broke. "I thought you were part of it," she said suddenly, her voice shaking. "When I discovered what Reinhardt had done, all the money, all the transfers came from your accounts. I believe you betrayed us." Maxwell stepped closer, his voice low, almost breaking. "I never betrayed you, not for 1 second. She planted winners in my company years before we even met. Everything was staged to make it look like me. Eleanor, I would have burned my empire to ash before letting anyone touch you." Eleanor's hands trembled, her eyes brimming, for the first time in years. She let herself believe. Sarah slammed a folder down, snapping the moment in two. "Believing doesn't matter. Proof does. This," she tapped the files pulled from the safe, "is enough to cripple Reinhardt. If we play it right." "What do you mean, play it right?" Maxwell asked. "She's speaking tomorrow," Sarah said. "International Biotechnology Conference, McCormick Place. She's unveiling her so-called miracle treatments. Every scientist, investor, and media outlet will be there. She'll stand on stage and polish her lies until the world throws money at her feet." Sarah's eyes gleamed with something fierce. "We'll hijack her moment. Show the world who she really is." Maxwell's chest tightened. "You're talking about a public confrontation. I'm talking about exposure on the grandest stage possible," Sarah corrected. "The evidence goes live. The world sees the children in cages, the financial trail, the experiments, everything. And while the world is watching," Eleanor whispered, "Reinhardt will be watching us." The twins looked up from their blankets, their voices soft but clear, spoken as one. "We can help." Everyone turned. Rosa's small hand clutched Lily's. "We can reach them, the other children. Show them they're not alone," Lily continued. "Help them fight back." Their eyes glowed with quiet certainty, unnerving in their maturity. These weren't ordinary children. They were proof of both horror and miracle. Maxwell knelt in front of them, his voice unsteady. "My daughters," he whispered. "You're stronger than anything Reinhardt could imagine. Stronger than her. Stronger than me." In that warehouse, under the hum of storm-dripping gutters, a plan was born. It was reckless. It was dangerous. It was the only way. Tomorrow, Victoria Reinhardt would step into the spotlight. Tomorrow, Maxwell Thornton would walk into the lion's den and drag her empire into the light. And tomorrow, the world would finally learn the truth. The Millionaire's final test. The woman at the Grave Speaks graveyard was silent that night. But not the kind of silence that brought peace. It was the kind that pressed against your chest. The kind that made your breath sound louder than thunder. The Millionaire stood before his wife's tombstone, a single candle flickering at its base. His world had changed in days, unraveling secrets that had shaken his soul. But tonight would decide whether those secrets broke him or built him. He heard footsteps, soft, hesitant, dragging against the wet grass. When he turned, he froze. The woman who had been crying at his wife's grave was there again, her face pale, eyes hollow, as if she carried a truth too heavy to bear. For a moment, neither spoke. The candle's flame swayed in the breeze, casting long shadows across their faces. "Why are you here again?" he finally asked, his voice low, almost trembling. "Why do you cry at her grave as if you knew her, when I never once saw you in her life?" The woman's lips quivered. She looked down, clutching something in her hands, a worn leather notebook, edges frayed, stained with tears. "She wanted me to give this to you," the woman whispered. "But I couldn't. Not until now." The Millionaire's heart pounded, slowly, almost fearfully. He reached for the book, his wife's handwriting carved across the cover. For him, when the truth must be known. He opened the first page, and his breath caught. Inside were letters. Letters she had written in secret, every one addressed to him. Words of love, yes. but also confessions, words that revealed a life he had never fully seen. Tears blurred his vision as he read aloud one line that cut deeper than any wound. If you are reading this, it means the woman who stood with me in my last days has finally kept her promise. She is my sister, the one you never knew I had. The millionaire stumbled back, stunned. Sister? He whispered, staring at the grieving woman. She nodded slowly, tears slipping down her cheeks. Yes, I am the one she kept hidden. Not because she didn't love me, but because she wanted to protect me from the world you lived in, from the people who wanted to destroy her happiness. I was the shadow she carried, and she asked me, before she died, to watch over you when you felt alone. The air felt heavier. The millionaire fell to his knees, clutching the letters, his body shaking with the weight of betrayal and revelation. His wife had kept this secret all along, but why? Why would she hide her own blood from him, as if answering his unspoken question? The sister continued, she knew you were building an empire, fighting battles every day, and she didn't want you to be burdened by her past, so she carried it alone. But she also knew one day the truth would save you, not break you. A storm rumbled in the distance, thunder echoing like judgment. He closed the notebook, staring into the darkness. Every memory of his wife now looked different. Her secret smiles, her late-night tears, her sudden moments of silence. She hadn't been distant. She had been carrying someone else's pain. But before he could speak, the sister's voice cut through the night. There's more, she told me. If you found out about me, it meant the danger she feared was close. And it's here. The people who once hunted her, who threatened her happiness, they now want what you have. Your empire, your legacy, and they will come for you. The millionaire froze. The story of love and loss had twisted into something darker, a conspiracy buried beneath grief. His wife hadn't just died of illness. There had been whispers, shadows, enemies still moving in silence. Who are they? He demanded, rising to his feet, voice trembling but fierce. The sister's gaze hardened. The one she never wanted you to fight, but now you must. Because if you don't, everything she sacrificed will be for nothing. Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the grave for a heartbeat. In that flash, the millionaire realized the graveyard was no longer just a place of mourning. It had become a battlefield, the place where truth, betrayal, love, and danger all collided. He clenched the notebook in his hands, a fire burning in his chest. His wife's last gift wasn't just love. It was a warning, a test, a call to courage. The sister stepped closer, her voice barely more than a whisper. Her story isn't over, and neither is yours. But you must choose, stay broken, or rise and fight the war she couldn't. The millionaire lifted his head toward the storming sky. His answer was silent, but it burned in his eyes. He would not let his wife's sacrifice be wasted, and so, on that rain-soaked night, the grieving husband became something else, a man forged by loss, but driven by purpose. He would uncover the truth. He would face the enemies that lurked in shadows. Because sometimes grief is not the end. It is the beginning of a war you never knew you were meant to fight.